Catching up with Sarah and Ginny, fueled by laughter and insights aplenty. Curiosity, connection, and learning that sticks. Real talk, real lives with practical tips. Welcome to Catching Up with Sarah and Ginny. Come on in.
Hello, Jay Davenport.
Hello, Ginny Bootman. How are you?
I'm very well. And tell me, where are you? Where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming to you from sunny south coast of Devon, in Dawlish Warren. So it's currently half term down here, and so I'm coming from the beach almost.
Well, you did just say, could I hear the sea? I mean, normally you get a shell, don't you, and kind of do all that. But you're like, can you hear the sea? And I was like, no. And I'm in the tummy button of the country where you used to live until you moved to your dream home, Jay.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I had to shut the window to close the sea out. It's about 300 yards in that direction at the moment. So it's a lovely place to live.
Wow. So introduce yourself to us, Jay, then. So we know where you're at, but tell us what you do.
Yeah, I'm Jay Davenport. I am the Regional Director for the Southwest at the Thinking Schools Academy Trust, which means that I work with 8 schools from across Torbay and Plymouth. Working with them to do great things for young people, transforming life chances. So it's great work to do.
Wow. 8 schools and transforming lives. I mean, that's a tall order, but nothing less than what I know you are capable of, Mr. Davenport. So now, how do we know each other? I can't wait for you to unravel this one, Jay. How do we know each other?
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a story, isn't it? So I think I'm going back to 2016, 2017, probably, maybe. Yeah, 2017. And in the belly button of the country, as you talked about it in Northamptonshire, and a movement, I think, called Educating Northants, which kind of took off when I think the Brexit was kind of paralysing kind of government, and there wasn't much happening locally with local government and so on. So a group of head teachers, educators and so on within Northamptonshire got together and thought, we can do this ourselves, and let's really start a grassroots conversation about education and wanting to just be better and help each other to improve the system. And so it started there, and then as a spin-off from that, I organised something called Ned Talks, which unbelievably was a voluntary Friday night. Come and have a chat around education, all free. Just educators getting together on a Friday night for a couple of hours, and talking all things education, and having a series of presenters, again using the grassroots theme to, share best practice around what great stuff, evidence-informed, research-based stuff was going on in schools at the time. And I think that you came to one of those at my school, and then I persuaded you to kind of join in and speak. I think that was it, and we kind of bumped into each other, and then developed a group of mutual friends, the great Roy Layton and Kath Kitchen, and had our little group of people kind of trying to change the world in education.
Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, the whole Educating Northants, as kind of, you say, a grassroots, that's hard to say, isn't it? Grassroots movement was, I don't know, it brought people together, Jay. It brought people together. We had a few in person. They were big events, actually, where people got to talk for 45 minutes. And then we had the Ned Talks, and it was kind of a feel-good thing, I think, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. People kind of turned up, didn't they? And then there was a bit of competition between schools about who could make the best cakes, and that kind of element about it. And I think that it was really at the start, pre-COVID, and at the start of that movement about like Brew Ed and those sorts of things, where it was just kind of taking it kind of back to basics and just getting great people in rooms together talking about education and talking about trying to do a better job for the young people that we had in our care, and met some great people along the way in terms of doing that. And much of the network that kind of I have and developed then, I still have today, including yourself, Ginny, and then COVID came, and I think that the fact that we'd established that pre-COVID really helped the conversations continue, and there was that whole support network, local and beyond, but a real kind of support network around um, people being used to talking to each other about some of the gnarly problems that we were facing at the time. And then obviously COVID provided a whole host of other gnarly problems that we hadn't kind of perhaps experienced before as school leaders. But the network allowed us to kind of sense check and to check in with people, and maybe make the feelings of isolation feel not quite so isolated. And so we moved things like Ned Talks and the second Educating Northants conference online, and we're still able to do all of those things and bring people together, even though we weren't physically able to be together. And so I think for lots of people that kind of felt like that familiarity of it really kind of felt comforting
Yeah.
in what were really difficult times, and we were kind of facing some difficult circumstances.
And what I found was it opened the door to me meeting other educators who were in a similar position, but who I could bounce ideas off. And because actually in education, we can feel quite siloed, and we can feel we are in our own school or we are in our own multi-academy trust. And I just felt it was really refreshing for me. And I did bring along, I'd kind of choose a colleague to bring along to the talks to go, actually, there's a bigger world out there. I was like that image of that person with that rucksack on, like going off into having an adventure. And it did feel an adventure. And it was comforting to know that what I was feeling was what many other people were feeling. And I think that is so reassuring, isn't it? When people go, yeah, I'm feeling that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing about it was that it was at a time when, and it's probably continued since then, but it was at a time when it was really kind of getting quite tribal on kind of social media and those sorts of things. You had to kind of pick a camp, and if you and, if people in your camp, everybody else was wrong. If you, and you had to kind of almost pick a side. And I think that part of what I really enjoyed about those times were that it allowed us to be outward facing, and but allowed us to kind of just go, well, actually, yeah, I can see, I can see why. And it became about context, and it became about community, and it became about great ideas. And you were able to then take those ideas away and say, well, would this work in my context? What do I believe in? And really kind of go back to kind of a sense of purpose, and those elements. And I think that people were starting to talk about inclusion at that time, but belonging, perhaps other than kind of Owen Eastwood, its book and so on, was at the periphery a little bit. We talked about belonging, but kind of in a roundabout way, rather than kind of going with, this is something that we really must get a hold of. And now I've got really interested in kind of beyond belonging into mattering and those sorts of things. And it felt like something that mattered. Kind of, you felt that there was this movement of just good people wanting to do a really good job, and people are allowed to have different views. And that was a kind of safe space for that to happen.
And everyone felt very valued, because when you think about it, there was a real breadth of people who were speaking, people who were attending events, and there were. I love this flattening of the hierarchy, but every voice was being heard. And I think that is really important as well, that the quiet voices were heard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really remember working with Christina Tabodinea on the second online Educating Northants conference. And in the planning of that conference, we were really keen to make sure that we had pupil student voice represented. We were really keen to make sure that we had parental voice represented and governor voice. And it was just kind of the range of lenses that we wanted to make sure were included in order to kind of paint the picture and to ensure that everybody was kind of understanding, or at least had exposure to this kind of wide variety of views, really. And I think that they were kind of important parts of the message. And I've kept that alongside in the work that I've done subsequently. I've really kind of sort of delved into this kind of lens leadership sort of sense, where you kind of self-checking all of the time, being aware of what your own experience has been to make you arrive at the particular point, and perhaps what your blind spots are, and who do I need to kind of check in with to make sure that I'm getting this right and I'm understanding different perspectives and what's actually going on.
I love that idea of I'm writing it down, blind spots and checking in. And and that was quite a long way round about how we know each other, but it really is, I think, at the core of what we're both about. So, Mr. Davenport, tell me then, what has been a recent wow moment for you?
Well, I always like to go back to what young people are doing when it comes to wow moments, and the privilege of being able to be in lots of schools, and one of the biggest privileges in my current role is the range of schools that I get to work with. And so I work with a grammar school and 3 non-selective secondaries, 3 primary schools, and also an AP alternative provision, PRU, and the kind of range of lenses that we just talked about in terms of that. And the number of young people I get to meet through my work, and so it's hard to pick out one wow moment from them, because there's lots, and that's the privilege of being able to work in and with schools. The thing that I've noticed from a kind of more systemic point of view that's kind of been uplifting and joyful, I think, in terms of my wow moment, is that there feels like there's been a shift from competition to collaboration. And to go back to our previous conversation, I think that's kind of a space that we existed in kind of Educating Northants. But I think that there's been a real shift. And we spoke briefly at the start that I've kind of moved down to a different location and those sorts of elements. And I've had a real insight I've moved away from my network. And I've had a real insight on what it's like to be new and not belong necessarily in that in that sense, and all of those kind of things, and still yet the sense of collaboration and working, whether it's with parents, whether it's with young people, whether it's about bringing the schools within our own trust together, or whether it's working with other trusts and people, that kind of sense that this is about place, and this is around place-based working for the common good. And I haven't always felt that is a space. I feel that there was a time in education, and probably still is in some aspects of our work, where we're really focused on making sure that this bit of it is absolutely right. And of course, the young people in our care need to be able to get the outcomes and all of that sort of stuff. But I think that there is also a responsibility for us around the sense of place where we are, and having a broader conversation around what how do we start to work together and not just within education. You know, some of the issues that we face, whether in SEND or beyond, are kind of bigger than schools, and it needs us to work with social care and housing and transport and health and so on and so forth. And you know, without kind of a willingness to collaborate. And over the last kind of 10 days or so, I've been involved in lots of like really good conversations where that piece of work is really starting to generate some momentum, and I think that that can only be good for the young people in our care.
So it is, and it is collaboration, which is a connection plus. Well, it when we work together, great things happen, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and you know, yeah, yeah, yes, they do. I mean, I was going to probably try and think of something a bit more profound, but it's true. You know, it's just the case that, you know, we can kind of plough our own field, but and even if that's a challenge to us. So we
Yeah.
talk about those blind spots, and even if we have to exist in a space of discomfort and kind of challenge our own thinking, and, you know, perhaps some elements of our work aren't quite where we want them to be, and so on. And but we have to find the people that are doing that well in similar sorts of contexts, and still ask the same questions around. You know, will this work for us? What can we do here in order to invest in the people, invest in the young people, so that they can be their best selves?
And I think it is that being open, isn't it, to listening, to actively listening to others, and actually, and I know you do this so well, to go, actually, what you're saying is actually better than what I was initially thinking. Having that openness.
Yeah, exactly, exactly right. And again, the privilege of working with the schools that I currently work with is, you know, I get to work with the school leaders within the alternative provision, and their lens on what we do, and the challenge and the discomfort that they can bring to, you know, the experience that I've, you know, had, and so on, which it has been at various times in SEND, but less so in that element of AP. And it's kind of been mind opening. You know, it's like you're just like, well, God, yeah, well, it seems so obvious, but yeah, I just hadn't kind of considered it through that kind of lens, I suppose.
Wow. And I love that idea of bringing in AP to actually kind of educate us, isn't it? You know, the way that they do that in AP does blow my mind as well. And actually to bring it into our mainstream is just phenomenal. And for you to have that as your norm, as your kind of your normal collaboration because of the schools that you work with, I think is phenomenal. You know, I think
Yeah.
it should be more of the norm, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, it's part of the system, and it should be, you know, it should be kind of seen and celebrated, because it's provide. We talk all the time, don't we, about provision and
Yeah.
finding the right provision for the young people that we've got, and we need to try and make sure that we look at this in a broad enough way, so that that whatever the right provision is doesn't seem like failure in our kind of narrow view of what success kind of looks like. And so how do we flip it so we can view it from the other end, and sort of say, this is our broad system and there's a space for everybody,
Yeah.
and we can work in that space. And you'll know our good friend Kath Kitchen, and it's a similar sort of thing around hospital education, and you know, and children with medical needs, and so on. If we're able to kind of think in a way that can make sure that we include all in our thinking, then that's got to be better for everybody
Yeah.
in the longer term.
Oh, I love that, Jay. I love that. I love that. And it's a great wowness to have, isn't it? To just have kind of, yeah, kind of its arms around everyone, isn't it? Kind of, I love that.
Yeah,
So
I
so
think that part of that is around being kind of brave enough to take on the bigger work. we often kind of work within in the kind of like boundaries,
Yeah.
and as long as that bit of it's okay, then we're gonna be all right. And I think that if we can sort of broaden our thinking around that, and kind of have the courage to reach out and kind of look through different lenses and really ask the questions that perhaps make us feel uncomfortable, and that kind of stuff. And when we speak to young people, whether they've got special educational needs, or whether they haven't, or whether when we speak to their parents, are we really trying to listen to understand, and then kind of internalizing that and think, oh, right, okay, so if that's the lens, then what?
Yeah.
Or have we already got a kind of preconceived idea of what it looks like, and then we're kind of trying to fit that into the box that we've already created? And there are boundaries. There are boundaries around funding, and all sorts of elements, and that we might like to affect. And it might be a kind of a difficult conversation to have, but understanding what perfect looks like from a variety of lenses, and that some of those perfect might jar with ours, because we've got 7,000-8,000 young people to be responsible for, and as a parent, I'm responsible. I'm only interested in my child's view, and I want them to have a really good deal. And part of our challenge is to how can we have both?
Yes. 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 Absolutely. So, if Send were a song, what would it be and why? And I have to tell you, we are putting together a Spotify playlist, which is fascinating at the moment. So we will be adding you to the playlist.
Oh, well, I feel under pressure now. I've got a few. I think people that know me well will kind of laugh at me at this, because they've probably been my default thing where I keep coming back to. But as a kind of growing up in the late 80s and the early 90s, the Levelers, and One Way. There's only one way of life, and that's your own. I think it kind of resonates in lots of places, and I've tried to uh, kind of, with my Send lens, I try and apply that, I suppose, and is that everyone's out there living their own life, and that looks very different for different people, and what they're trying to do, but we're all striving for something, and kind of understanding that. So that was one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there are probably others as well, but if you just want one for your playlist, then that one will do for those reasons, I think.
And I think it isn't a song I know, Jay. So I'm going to have to listen to it and really internalize the lyrics as well. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I might be backtracking now, but I don't I don't know whether it kind of all applies, all the way through that. But I definitely think that kind of sense of, there's this kind of sense that you've got this life and you need to kind of live it and make the most of it,
I love
is an
that.
important,
I love
is
that.
an important message.
Let's go with that. Let's not go with all the lyrics. Let's go with the theme of it. And
Yeah,
actually, from
thank
a
you.
parental point of view, I think it's very pertinent, isn't it? This is my child's one chance to live this life, and I am their advocate, and I will do everything that I can to ensure that for them. And we do need to always have that in the forefront of our minds as educators, that this the parent is the advocate for their child. So no, I think it is a
Yeah.
really good choice because of what you're saying about it. What can we do to ensure that everybody gets to have the best life that I guess they deserve?
Yeah, and I think that it's a great point that you make about advocacy, because I think that advocacy is crucial, because sometimes as a Senko, you can feel conflicted, can't you? Because you can absolutely understand the parental point of view, and the child point of view, and yet you can also understand the constraints of the school, but or the trust, or wherever you're working. But I think that, you know, our role in that sense is to be the advocate, and like who's in the room mentioning their name, and who's kind of like talking around, you know, and making sure that that voice is heard within the SLT room, or wherever the decisions are being made. And, you know, at the end of the day, decisions will be made for any number of reasons. But being the voice in the room, and making sure that we then take, you know, difficult, courageous, brave decisions to stand up and kind of advocate, even if it kind of might feel unpopular within some of the rooms that we're in. And that's not that, you know, there are SLTs dismissing the needs of kind of young people, but there are real constraints, there are real boundaries, there are real things that you have to kind of overcome, and decision making isn't as straightforward as, yeah, that's the problem, and so here's the decision.
And I heard something the other day, and it was around the words of have the right people at the table, or have the decision makers at the table, to ensure that when we are having these conversations, that we do have the correct people who can answer some questions that we may not be able to answer, but somebody at senior leadership, you know, may be able to. Otherwise, messages can get a little bit confused. So I think I agree with everything that you're saying about making sure we've got the right people at the right meeting at the right time. And actually, this comes really down to, in the first instance, the class teachers. You know, the class teachers are the people who are with those children day in, day out. And I do think that sometimes a Senko can be brought in when actually the first port of call is the class teacher alongside the Senko. So I think what you're saying is really, really important about having the right people, you know, at the right meeting. And also, sometimes we do need to have mediators in that room, because sometimes things can get a little bit heated. And I think that is, as you said before, when people are speaking kind of in parallel or alongside one another, rather than having those honest, transparent conversations. And like you say, they sometimes are really they are quite difficult to have. But when everybody knows, then people understand. And I think that transparency is really, really important. So thank you for that.
Yes, you can.
That uncovered a great conversation, Jay. So thank you so much. So tell us about a favorite book of yours, and tell us why it is a favorite book. It can be educational, non-educational, book you've read now, childhood book. We're opening it out to you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you know, Ginny, then I try and read virtually everything and find it a struggle sometimes to do that. And so I kind of essentialism has been a kind of really important part for me. So that's Greg McKeown. I'm not sure I've got the pronunciation correct on that, but in kind of my structural work, that's been kind of really useful to kind of keep the main thing, you know, at the center, at the forefront of, and the things that are essential in your work, which kind of provides the time and space to do the important work, and to kind of reduce the distractions. And so that's been important for a while. More recently, the two that have kind of had you know, in some ways, a profound effect. One is Poor by Catriona O'Sullivan,
Right.
which is you know, a great text around you know, what it feels like to go through that journey of not feeling included, and then finding, you know, people that believe in you, and going kind of finding the places where you do or you don't belong, and then finding the people that believe in you enough so that you matter, and you actually have some significance to some people in a time where perhaps it didn't feel that you mattered at various other points in your life to various individuals. And I've probably not done it justice in terms of in terms of the story, which is kind of really powerful in terms of how it's written and comes across as a narrative. But what it did enable me to do was really kind of take the kind of my sense of what that meant, and apply it to the work that I do now. And if how do we include, how do we kind of see people, and make sure that we're doing the things that matter for them, that we make people feel like they're significant and can make a contribution and are seen and are heard, and are needed, and and sometimes in our most vulnerable people, we need to do that most.
Yes.
And that probably leads into the kind of third element, where I've kind of got, I go down these rabbit holes and and find myself in there, which is The Art of Mattering. The Power of Mattering by Zach Mercurio. And that kind of brings together the sense of the threads of those things. One is kind of a story, and the other one's kind of a social construct narrative, I think, leadership around how you can kind of create that sense of significance in people. And so I think a combination of those things have kind of really challenged my thinking, from as I said at the start, the experience and the lens that you arrive in a particular spot based on the experiences you've had, don't they, in order to get to that spot. And in lots of ways, I've had lots of privilege in my life, and so on and so forth. And so you need to have those challenges to be able to kind of be to at least acknowledge, and kind of understand people. And I think that I've really started to listen a lot more. And actually, if I can just interrupt myself, to come back to this, is I found that when I became a Senko as well. Actually, I became a Senko after I became a head. And so I'd done my head here and became a Senko afterwards. And again, that was like a really important, interesting, and I just wish that I'd done it sooner. And then I don't know how the structures work, but I think that school leaders, if you can become a Senko, it would help the system, but also like the lens that you get into, and the conversations around kind of family and those sorts of things are kind of so important. And it really kind of can alter your view.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to end, because you were a head who became a Senko, and I was a head who became a Senko as well as a head. But I often say to people, does an ex-head make a good Senko, or does an ex-Senko make a good head? And I remember you becoming a Senko, and I remember many of our conversations, Jay, when you first became a Senko, because it is a world that people need to more than visit. They need to immerse themselves in it. And what I've loved from talking to you is what I've got a sense of, everything that you do, you are consciously looking through different lenses to see how we can do the best for the children in our care. And I'm taking away the fact that we do need to acknowledge our blind spots. And when we acknowledge those, then we do see things, don't we, through different lenses. And it's just been great. It's just been absolutely great chatting to you. And also the fact that I love the fact that you've shared the fact that actually you've moved from the tummy button of the country to the seaside, and you've experienced what children experience, and you're acknowledging that and bringing it back to ourselves and things that we experience, I think is one of the best ways that we can then connect with the children in our care. So Jay, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having a conversation with you, and we'll have to meet up for another curry sometime.
Can't wait. Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Jay. It's been brilliant. Bye for now.
Thanks for joining us this time on Catching Up with Sarah and Ginny.
Always a pleasure and never a chore.